Hi guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. It's me, Steve Hull, and over there is Pascal Floor. How's it going, Pascal?
Yeah, running joke. I'm sick once again.
But not a joke.
No, it's not a joke.
Actually sick.
Yeah, actually the case. Yeah.
And it's another cold.
What?
It's kind of like a cold again, isn't it? Like not a flu quite that severe.
No, it's just like sniffy nose once again, a little bit of sore throat. The good thing is that you guys know how often I was sick over the past year now. Ever since Tony was born. Fucking Tony, what is wrong with him? I don't think that it's just Tony, but probably like having two kids at home. But I hardly ever had like a lot of coughing going on, at least not during the times of COVID. I can remember, though, that in February, I was very, very sick for a very long time, like I think 4 weeks. And there, I was constantly coughing. February, right before COVID, buddy. Just imagine that. And now that I'm thinking about it, buddy, Katie's mom, she had COVID. And that was during that time. Maybe I had COVID during that time.
Could be very possible, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Now that I'm really thinking about it. Because
I hope you did and got it out the way, and although there's different strains.
Because she was on that skiing holiday in February, and that was the epicenter in Europe where everything spread. Right before that, it wasn't really on the radar in Europe, and she was in Austria for skiing holiday, and this was kind of where everything kind of spread out, where every person then spread it across the countries then, right? And she was there, and she had it during that time. Possibly I actually caught it because I do remember that I was coughing for like 4 weeks and said to Katie, like, I can't even imagine that it's sticking around for so long, that it's just so resilient and just being there. Maybe, I don't know. I will never know unless I'm doing a test.
Yeah. I've spoken to some people who are like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I had it, like when they think about the symptoms and like how ill they were before, like it all occurred. And it's definitely possible, especially for you because Katie's mum had it and everything and you're in contact with her.
Yeah.
I don't think I have because I haven't, touched wood. It continues to stay this way. I haven't been ill this year, really. So, and certainly not with the symptoms it's come through. But it's scary because I think it is easy because you only really view what's in your close kind of network. So if you don't look at the news much and none of one in your family or close circles had it, you probably think it's not that big a deal. Mm-hmm. And I've just seen a few people, especially if you're like in our health and age category where it's like we're not meant to be at risk, but then you see like this odd one person who's just had an awful experience with it. It's just like, shit, like just really hope no one listening and us included ever get anything that severe.
Yeah, I could take it down the political route, but I know that our audience doesn't appreciate that. So I will not take it down that road then. But yeah, here we are now, very sick once again. And I had made up my mind after the last episode of actually going into a mini-cut. Then I started the first session the first day, training day of the new mesocycle of the mini-cut. And I reported back to you, Steve, and said like, okay, this is weird. I don't experience any kind of pumps, or I have at least a very, very hard time to get them. Everything feels kind of heavy and I'm feeling weak and stuff like that. Perhaps I should consider a proma phase, right? And then said you came back to me, said like, yeah, this doesn't really sound right. And I then got into the second training session. Was the same thing, and then I actually made up my mind, okay, let's do a proma phase, maybe just a shorter proma phase. And then the next day, I was actually starting to feel very shitty. And now, like yesterday was the worst day where I had massive headaches, very stuffy nose, sore throat, sleep is a little bit disrupted as well. And I'm so happy that I actually decided to take a proma phase now instead of jumping into the mini-cut, being in a caloric deficit for 2 days and then coming straight out of it again because it's kind of forced upon you.
Yeah, I think it's no one really wants to take the primer phase, but it's kind of similar to the deload. It's like, when you need it more or less. And if you try and push past it, like you see, like you hope you're functionally overreaching, you start non-functionally overreaching potentially, and that's not good, and your performance is dipping. So it's the same for you, like on a larger level. If you just kept pushing it, yeah, you could have done the mini cut, but what would you have risked in that position? Probably performance loss, potentially muscle loss. So you're definitely doing the right thing, especially because your mass phase had been so productive, and just cementing that by just maintaining for a period of time. So it's definitely the right call for you. And like what do we tend to recommend? I can't remember what it is in the book, but maybe like once every 6th month, going through this sort of like lower volume phase. And I know it'd been a while for you because of, and probably for a lot of people, because of all the training from home and doing crazy stuff at home, and you couldn't really do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why I'm so most of the time it is like this, that you do or make a decision that you then regret having done, right? Because it turns out like other than you expected. So you guys know that I'm a little bit into trading, but I'm not a day trader or anything alike. I would call myself or say that I'm more a positional or a swing trader. So I'm trying to time the peak and the lows of the market. And sometimes you don't do it, right? And then you think like, oh, fuck, why didn't I do it that way? And also sometimes, and this is just typical human psychology, you see something actually skyrocketing, and you think like, and you have considered maybe investing into that, but decided not to do it. And then you also regret not having done it. Right? While in reality, you just made a calculated guess or decision. And this is the same way, right? So there's no value in thinking like, I could have done X, Y, Z, when in reality, you've made that decision based on your current well-being or current perception of the situation. It's the same as, so I had a discussion with Katie's mom about raising kids, and that as long as you try your very best to always make it right for the kids, you should never regret your decisions, because you probably make the decisions based on good intentions. And only in hindsight, we will know whether this decision was the right one. And then it's already too late, and there's no value in worrying about it then at all.
It really reminds me of a book that I read. I think it was Danny Lennon, I think, really liked it. I listened to him on a podcast really randomly ages ago. It's called like Placing Bets or something. And it's saying like every decision we ever make, we can't ever know it absolutely. We just know ratios. We just know probabilities based off our experience and kind of looking at things. And I always say that to clients, like when they're like, oh, you're a magician. How did you know my body weight was going to come down this week? And I'm like, it was just like a well-educated guess, really. Like, it sounds as awful as like, oh, you should definitely know what you're doing, you're a coach, but we're just making well-educated guesses. So it's the same, like you said, it's basically saying what you exactly said there. You can never know. And like when people go like, I knew that was going to happen or something like that, it's like, you didn't know 100% because you can't possibly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're just looking at the probabilities, and based off of that, you are making a calculated decision most of the time. Sometimes we are blind for the data, and then we are making just like the decision based on our emotions, and that is most of the time the wrong thing to do.
It's actually, I don't know why that's just reminded me of, we brought up COVID and we talked about this sort of thing and like ignoring data. And it kind of made me smile when this happened, because the government, we have like different tiers. And I know you saw like Liverpool went into tier 3 and that meant gym shutting. And it was based off no data. And in fact, we have data to suggest gyms don't need to close. And so a group of people were really rallying against that, and they've been on the news and everything. And kind of I shared a few bits so people on Instagram would have seen that. I know you shared it as well. Yeah. And it was such a win to see gyms reopen. I was like, man, this is awesome to see. Like I bet the purest like bros were sharing this and loving it. Like the science, like it's science supports it. And then it's like, I mean, normally you don't really, you're not fond of science, are you? Always. It made me giggle inside a little bit.
No, but I think that was a huge win, because thing is, I never got why, especially like a couple of months back. And I think that every listener will be able to relate to that, to the way I felt in that situation. And I'm not even living in the UK. But when I saw the announcement that pubs are going to open up before the gyms, I couldn't understand it at all, the logic behind it. And now that it is, so formerly it wasn't in the same category, obviously, right? It was, apparently more risky to go to the gym than to be in a pub. While now we have more and more data that this is probably not the case. And now still pubs are closing at the same time when gyms are closing. Doesn't really make any kind of sense, especially when the data doesn't suggest that.
The hilarious thing I recently saw were that because you're allowed to go to work, so you're allowed to be indoors, even in even in a tier 3 with other people from different households, but you're not allowed to do that in other areas. And some restaurants, I don't know if this is actually legit and you're allowed to do this, but some restaurants are saying, oh, you can come in with other people from different households. Just it's a lunch dinner, or it's a lunch meeting, a business meeting, and it's like, oh shit, you could just swindle it any way you want now. Oh man, it's crazy.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I mean, there's a lot going on here in Germany. I don't know how it is in other countries, but it's crazy in Germany, like honestly. Thing is, though, that I can understand that there are people who are starting to get very unhappy with the regulations that are being forced upon them. Once again, I don't want to take it too much down the political route, because there will always be people who aren't satisfied with what we have to say, right? But this is what a political viewpoint is. Different viewpoints on different kind of topics and things around politics. So you don't have to agree with everything that I'm saying. But here is just like, I can understand why some people are getting more and more frustrated with certain things, because certain things, they seem like random when there are certain regulations or certain restrictions that don't really make any kind of sense. But you have to still oblige to those rules without anyone giving you like proper reasons as to why this is the case. This is also one thing here in Germany, that normally it's built upon a democracy and on a feudal, I don't know how it's called in English, feudalistic system. So that it's on a country basis that decisions are being made, right? So it's like a tier system. And now it's just like the government, like a handful of people making the rules and restrictions for the entire country, where this doesn't really make sense, because not the entire country has the same amount of COVID spikes. Like, of course, a city like Berlin has a very, very high number because it's a major city. But on the countryside, not so much, right? And is it very much then the same to apply the same restrictions to people there as it is then for people in a major city? It's not really justified, right? And there are more and more conflicts arising now in Germany. And I would assume that it's the same in other countries as well. And we've seen it a month ago already in the US, that people immediately stood up and said like, okay, this is not correct. How they did it or why they did it may not be why I'm understanding why people are going on the streets or so. But everyone has their own reasons. Whether I like it, whether I understand why they are going out there, doesn't really matter, because this is once again also here my viewpoint. But I can understand why more and more people are getting frustrated with certain regulations and restrictions.
Yeah, I think there's never going to be a perfect answer, is there, unfortunately? And I'm just, it's just made me super grateful for what we do, in that, like, we work from home the whole time, we work online. There have been some countries I've had, I think it's in Wales and Ireland, I think their gyms are shutting. And then I've had a client in Israel, his gym is closed. Melbourne, they're still closed. So it's actually crazy. But so many people now have home gyms almost.
Yeah, it's crazy here in Australia. So one of my athletes, shout out to Georgia, she's living in the Victoria area. And I think, so she said to me that they will first reopen things and lift the restrictions when there hasn't been any confirmed case in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. That is just like, I mean, only one person doesn't have to follow the rules, and then it still continues to spread. So every single person needs to oblige in order to make this happen.
So many people
that's crazy. I mean,
don't know the rules properly either. Like it's, and it's just like, oh, I couldn't do that. Oh, well, okay. Like people can't go on dates and snog. Like they can go on a date outside and be 2 meters away from each other. But like, I don't know. There's so many single people who have been not able to do stuff for how many months? Is this realistic? I don't know.
Man, I'm so happy that that I now have a family during the lockdown period. Or, well, I don't know. I was always like, over the past years, I developed being more and more intrinsic and actually more of a hermit, liking being by myself. So I don't know. Maybe this was the perfect time actually being a single for someone like me.
I guess on a related note, the only thing cool for me, actually is some kind of not big news, but interesting stuff, I guess, was I did have a little trip away. So I took a couple of days off kind of my laptop and off work and went to the Peak District and hiked a bit. And man, you probably have it this way, I guess, Pascal, as well, where when you take a few days off, like it is stressful, but you appreciate it so much and it makes you realize it's probably something you should do more. It's just always so hard when you're self-employed to do it.
But I don't know how you feel about it. I do, but at the same time, there's always kind of the stress in the back of my head. I think that if I would be financially independent, right, and I would really just do it for just like the sake of it, right, and I wouldn't rely on it from a revenue perspective, I think I would be very stress-free. I think that then I could just be like, yeah, you will not hear from me in like the next 2 weeks. But because it's a business and we are doing it also, of course, to make a living, I have a very hard time then to shut off. But that's just hard.
That's why, like, the way I ended up doing it is like just one lot of clients, 1 week missed check-ins. But I can remember when I started, I think I took 2 weeks off at one point, but I was like available via, I don't even know how I did it, available via email. I think I didn't have that many clients and it didn't stress me out the same way. Whereas now when you're like a fully fledged business, I don't know, you have a family, you're buying a house, whatever. Yeah, it does get more stressful and it's hard to switch off. But a big thing that I really enjoyed was just being away from the city and being out and about in nature and outdoors. That's particularly nice. I was saying that to you, and I know you're a big kind of lover of being out of the city as well. And I think I need to do that more, even if I'm working, just at least like so I can walk somewhere that isn't just a road and building works and fucking pollution or whatever everywhere.
How have your legs been holding up like after the hiking trip?
Actually, not too bad. We didn't do any like crazy hikes. They're only up to maybe 4 hours, so they weren't like terrible. Over the whole time there, we did a lot of steps. But
what shoes did you wear? Still like sneakers only?
They were Cameron, who I went with, actually had like running trainers on.
Boy!
I actually had some that I bought. Well, my parents bought for me when we went to Canada when I was like 16 or something, and they were like trail running ones. So they were like really good for it. They got soaked, like if they got wet, they'd like go through, but they're perfect for actually what we were doing. So I was very glad to have those trainers. It makes me want to get out and do more of that.
Yeah, hiking can very much fuck up your legs and also the feet, like properly.
Luckily, I think it might be because I have like really big ankles that it didn't impact me so much, because it is like you're walking on like uneven surfaces and
just
everything.
Have elephant legs, just like one big piece just on the ground.
So no, it was awesome. And the other cool news is that, well, I've just dived into my mini cut. So fortunately, I did have a primer phase back in March. So basically, when we started going into lockdown, I luckily had a barbell and everything, so could do a primer, and it was perfectly timed for me. So yeah, I've gone straight into my mini cut, and yeah, I'm excited to just actually get it done. Mini cuts aren't particularly exciting, but yeah, it's get out. It'll be exciting at least once I'm done to see again if I've gained a bunch, because mini cuts are a great time to see if you've gained some new muscle, because that's when you get to take off the layers and get relatively lean to where you were before and be like, oh, do I look bigger? Am I bigger or as lean at a bigger, heavier weight? Maybe I've gained, I don't know, it'll be great to have gained a pound since like I ended the cut. That would even be pretty good for me. So, but I also said I probably, for a client, wouldn't do it this way because I still think I'm in good shape. I'd actually generally recommend someone do like a primer or active recovery and then continue to mass, get even bigger. And I'd mass hopefully over 200 pounds if I could push it. But it's just for me and like placing bets. This was my bet that this is the best bet for me because it buys me a bunch more massing time where I can be really free of diet fatigue and then start contest prep relatively lean. And so I don't have to do like a double pump prep where like diet for a bunch of time, then maintain and then diet again. I can kind of do it in one go. And I guess potentially you'll be on a similar path if next year is on the cards to compete. Fast, efficient fat loss. Does that sound like music to your ears? The mini cut movement might just be for you. Mini cuts are like robbing the fat bank. You want to get in and out with as much fat as possible. In a short period of time, you could easily look to lose 6 to 12 pounds of fat. The mini cut movement is excellent. There's group support for extra accountability and also expert help within the group. We have educational videos to keep you on track along the way, and you get all your nutrition and training customized and individualized for you. So if that sounds of interest, get involved with the mini cut movement.
Yeah, and that's what I'm considering right now. Now that I'm doing a prime phase, and once the prime phase is over, we are already entering November time. Whether something like a mini cut does make sense if I were to compete next year. You know, if I'm now doing a mini cut just like for 4 weeks, then going back to a gaining phase, which is then just like 2-3 months or so, does really make sense. So I don't know. There's just a thought in my head where it's like, okay, why not then just continue now? Perhaps even just go into another gaining phase, because it's not that I'm super fat or so. Of course, I'm on the cusp where it would also be beneficial of doing a mini cut. But if I were to do a contest prep, then right. I mean, the question is always there for me at the moment of like, okay, when this prime phase is over, mini cut or not, contest prep or not next year, because I have to say, it's very compelling. The thought would be very compelling to compete next year, not from a private life perspective, but more so just because I would love to prep with you. That has always been a goal, right? We've tried now two times already.
Times-ish.
And also, a handful of my athletes are going to compete. And I think that next year there will be quite a lot of athletes, in my roster at least, and perhaps even in your roster, that will compete at those UK shows. It would be freaking cool to then get to compete together with them, but then just in general, step on stage or get to show day and be there as Team Revive Stronger and hopefully destroy just some people there. And that is just a very, very compelling thought to me. And that's why I'm still considering this.
Yeah, I guess it depends for you if you're looking to compete earlier next year or later, because mine's like I'm aiming for a later show date so that hopefully I qualify for finals. So then that's why kind of I have the time to be able to mini cut and then mass for another like over 3 months to get like a whole almost massing macro cycle in there again. Whereas if you're competing earlier in the year, then a mini cut probably doesn't make sense because it's like, well, it's just kind of like you're just going to not have enough time to really get much massing momentum after it. So yeah, I don't think there's a wrong answer for you at least.
No,
and I think
there isn't.
The good thing is you're not miles out of shape, which that would be the only problem where someone got like way out of shape. It's like, well, it's going to be tricky.
I definitely didn't push to new PRs in regards to my body weight. That's for sure. So
I didn't either. I want to do a video on this where I think I need a whiteboard, but I've described it in a presentation where, like, as long as you're in this zone of body fat where you feel good, you can be productive and have great training. You're growing muscle. You don't have to be in a new body weight to grow muscle. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So if you're mini cutting to stay in here, that's great. But if you're mini cutting and going below where you feel good and healthy to be able to train and be productive, and you're seeing performance drop during that mini cut, maybe that's not the best thing to do. So yeah, I don't think you need to have gone to like a new massed body weight to have grown new muscle. Like you said, this has been your best mass ever. And I mean, some people, I don't know, if people flip-flop between, should I stay leaner? I listened to a Brian Whittaker podcast just now, and he's 170 pounds at the moment. This is like his massing off-season weight. His stage weight is 160. Oh. So, like,
yeah, and I mean, if you've watched the presentation with Cliff Wilson that we've recorded last year when he was over in London, he was also bringing up Brian and also Peter Fitchen, and both over the time span. So Brian Whittaker, in a time span of 10 years, his stage weight only changed by 1 pound from the first time he stepped on stage up until he got his pro card. 1 pound of a difference on stage weight. Right? And the same applies to Peter Fitchen. Just the time span was 14 years. And his look is completely different, but also the difference is only 1 pound.
It's crazy.
Right? So you shouldn't expect to have like gained 20 pounds of muscle mass or so and completely look different in just a matter of like 3, 4, 5 years. Impossible, unless you are a complete newbie. You're starting from a very, very skinny physique. I'd start to delve into bodybuilding, and then you are just like a genetic freak and a very quick responder to gain then a significant amount of body weight. But if you already have competed before, you shouldn't expect to gain that amount of muscle mass in such a short period of time. Just like Brian Whittaker, like, who is Brian Whittaker? That is enough to be said. And then also Peter Fitchen, who has a tremendous physique. They both have invested 10 to 14 years for 1 pound different on the stage, which of course looks different. But if I were to tell you, just from our perception of how things are, especially presented over on social media, you would expect that 1 pound of a difference in 10 years, that is ridiculous, right? And then you take a look at someone like Brian Whittaker and you think like, holy fuck, eh? Right?
When you present it like that, it's like your mind's blown. But I hope people aren't taking that as they've only gained 1 pound of muscle, because that's not what's happened.
No. Absolutely not. I mean, the physique has completely changed. That's for sure. You can see significant amount of muscle mass that has been put on. But still, from the way we perceive things nowadays and the way that Instagram and social media is presenting us what reality looks like, you would be underwhelmed to hear that or to see that. Because it's the same thing that we brought up in the past about the comparison of like 15 years ago when the first X-Men came out and Hugh Jackman was there standing topless. Everyone was just like, holy shit, that is so good. Or like Brad Pitt in Fight Club. Everyone wanted to look that way. Now, people look at that picture and think like, that is pathetic. Like, what is this even? Right? And this is just how our perception has changed about what is a great physique and what isn't. Sorry for that. And the same applies for us, of course, in regards to bodybuilding. If I were to tell you, like, okay, give it 10 years, you will only have, like, put on, like, sorry for that. The only difference when you step on stage is 1 pound. Yes, you look different, but 1 pound, so many people would get disheartened by it.
Yeah, they absolutely would. And I think part of that is just pure lack of understanding. But when you show them the photos of Brian Whittaker or someone, and I know Brian's actually got on his website, if you search Brian Whittaker, you'll be able to find his website. He's got like pictures and documenting his
it's the
changing
entire
how his
story.
physique looks. Yeah, it's really cool. But yeah, I hope, I know for myself, like I'm never going to be a heavyweight bodybuilder. It's just, I'm not going to step on stage over 80 kilograms. It's just not happening. But I'd like to maximize as much as I can my room within the middleweights. And maybe, like we've spoken about, maybe I really hope I might be 5 pounds heavier than last time on stage. But in reality, as long as I look that much improved, it doesn't matter. Like like you've gained the muscle, you might just be more shredded, whatever it is. So yeah, I guess.
So our man Connor, he has made a tremendous post about glutes and just like conditioning and sacrificing muscle mass for conditioning. And I want to hear your take on it, because this is something that is right now circulating around in our field, our realm, when it comes to natural bodybuilding, to not sacrifice muscle mass for the sake of conditioning. What's your take on that?
I find it really interesting. And as soon as you started saying that, it made me think back to when you've talked about like how easy is it to lose muscle mass? And I know your kind of opinion on that is it's pretty fucking hard to lose muscle mass. So as soon as you're saying it, I'm thinking, man, how much muscle mass are people really losing? And that leads me down the path of, I think people just get really depleted and they look flat, and therefore they think they're potentially sacrificing it. And I know Alberto Nunez has talked about this, where like you basically get to a position where you want to look super flat, but super shredded and pretty shitty, but then you've got another few weeks to refill everything. And that comes in that like, what's it called? Metabolic building period of time that has been spoken about by Dr. Joe. And he's spoken through that. And I even experienced that as I dieted down to 180 pounds, where I was looking okay, like quite lean. But as I started increasing calories, I was just like, fuck, like I look way more shredded because the muscle glycogen is now filling within the muscles, that is pushing against the skin. So that short experience there even brought me more into the idea of, I'm not sure people are sacrificing muscle. I think maybe they're just not getting lean enough early enough to then be able to build back up their glycogen stores. But often like a peak week can really change a physique. And this is where it really can. If you're truly shredded, a peak week really can change your physique. Whereas I think a lot of people get scared because they think maybe they're sacrificing muscle, but possibly they don't have that much muscle, or they're just getting really flat. And so they start using way more refeeds or like slowing down their rate of loss because they're scared to lose that muscle mass. And I just think unless you're doing something real wacky, the amount of muscle you're losing probably isn't going to be huge. And at the end of the day, condition is probably rated above a lot of the other markers for a lot of organizations still, especially like glute conditioning is almost like a bit of a, if you're not got that on stage, you're probably not winning for a lot of organizations, or at least there's going to be someone on stage who will be as big as you with shredded glutes, possibly. So I think my opinion stems to, that basically. I'm not sure how much people are sacrificing muscle, and then more so sacrificing like glycogen stores, and why not build in a metabolic building phase, which would be perfect, and it's hard to do it, rather than kind of coming in a bit soft, which at the end of the day, with the conditioning standards at the moment, it's just not going to get you a win, or unlikely to. I think that's where I stand, at least.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I have several different thoughts about it. First and foremost is I definitely agree with the things that you're saying. Thing is that when people, I think they are coming from a different perspective of having false expectations, as so often, unfortunately. Most of the time, people are expecting that they've gained much more muscle mass than they actually have in the off-season, or that they are carrying more muscle mass than they actually do. So then they are starting dieting, and perhaps they had just always flattering body fat distribution. So let's say a lot of body fat is being stored in your delts, right? And that gives them the round look. And now you're starting to diet down, and that all dissipates, right? And nothing is left anymore. And also the muscles are then depleted. And all of a sudden you have a super flat looking delt. And before that, you were always like, holy shit, I had such good delts, right? But it was just like a flattering body fat distribution. And once again, you just got in there with the false expectations of how much muscle mass you've actually been carrying. So you go in there, you start dieting, and then all of a sudden everything is revealed. And it is perhaps not to your satisfaction. But you are still far away from revealing certain areas that will then truly make you stand out. And this is another point that I'm then bringing up, besides the wrong expectations that Cliff Wilson is always then talking about. And I think that Cliff Wilson is a great testament to what is possible when you are freaking shredded. And I'm talking about freaking shredded, because this is what he's capable in doing with nearly all of his athletes. And he has produced a lot of pro cards. And yes, in the US, it is easier to get a pro card. But if you are looking at the caliber of his athletes and what they are bringing to stage, it's sometimes very, very freakishly, where you are just being like, holy shit, what is this? And when you are able to bring something like this to stage, body, this will stand out unless there is like a true mass monster. But then he has a different ability on stage. Then it doesn't really matter whether he's super lean. But who gets up there on a natural bodybuilding scene and is outshining everyone in regards to mass? That is hardly ever the case. This is only the case for true outliers. And then for them, getting into condition, true peak condition may not be as important because they are standing out because of their sheer mass. But if you don't have that, you need to differentiate yourself or basically stand out from the rest of the crowd with conditioning. And this is only possible if you're pushing it to levels that hardly anyone else is willing to push it to. This is what Cliff is always saying. So many people are getting to the point of being shredded and being like, yes, this is the look. Oh no, you have 10 more pounds to lose. What? Where should these 10 pounds be coming from? Believe me, you have 10 more pounds to lose. And this is then the time that makes the difference, right? And that's why Cliff is such a good coach, because he is able to squeeze it out of most of his athletes. And once again, there's a testament for that, because if conditioning wouldn't be rewarded, then he wouldn't produce so many pro cards or pro athletes. Of course, bodybuilding always comes in with trends. And one we can definitely remember is something like the difference between the golden era of bodybuilding in comparison to the 90s, when someone like Dorian Yates stepped on stage and everyone was just like, okay, this is the introduction of the mass monsters. There was a clear trend going from that, in my opinion, more aesthetically pleasing look to the 90s very mass monsters. Marcus Rühl, for example, insane, right? But at the same time, there were still some very aesthetically pleasing people, just on a side note. But bodybuilding always comes in trends. And perhaps right now in the natural realm, it is conditioning. And it hasn't really changed yet. Perhaps it will change at some point, but the time isn't now. So once again, just to summarize it real quickly, I think it's wrong expectations that people think that they are carrying more muscle mass than they actually do. And once they are then losing tissue, which is mostly fat tissue that was very flattering for their physique, they're getting disheartened and think like that they are losing muscle mass, when in reality, they are just losing a lot of the flattering fat mass, and maybe they are just depleting the glycogen stores. Because let's be real here, once again, to lose muscle mass, like properly losing muscle mass, you need to do irresponsible things, or it will be reflective in your training over the time span of a couple of weeks. But if you are training and you are reporting still that the training is going fantastic, and you are reporting that the performance is still staying on par how it was over the past couple of weeks, then you're not losing any kind of muscle mass. You can't tell me that. Right? So this, and then also just like conditioning is just rewarded still. And to ignore that is being kind of ignorant.
Yeah, I think it's well said. I think it's another discussion to say whether or not for some people it's worth the pain to take off those 10 pounds. For some people it might not be worth that pain. But that's a different discussion versus there's still 10 pounds to lose. Like you have slightly soft glutes or hams or whatever, which is often the case. I would say quads are a great example of, like, people think they have massive legs, and then it's like, yeah, but you just store shitloads of fat there, and like there's no detail coming through yet. And to get like tons of detail through the quads, like sometimes you have to take off a lot more than you think. So yeah, I think that was well said.
Same goes for the chest. I mean, so many people that don't really have that chest such as yours that really sticks out, right? When they are carrying a little bit of body fat, it looks super soft and as if you don't have any kind of chest musculature. And it first then comes out with definition and the roundness and all that kind of stuff when you're getting lean. All right. So, yeah, I think overall, if you're trying to go against what the judges are looking for, it can work, of course, but the likelihood that you're successful is very much decreased. Because whether you like the trend or not, is not up for debate. Right? It's like as if you are, I don't know. I'm trying to find an anecdote, but I can't really think of any. Maybe like cuisine. If you are a kitchen chef and you are participating at a championship, and the judges, they want this year to just see like, I don't know, fusion kitchen, and you're just delivering them like a traditional meal, maybe you're not rated as well, right? Even though that the food was freaking great, still, it isn't what they were looking for. So,
cool. Should we get to questions?
It's your turn.
So, we have our buddy Andrew Pottercheck asking, any new revelations? Wait, did I say that right? Revelations even, regarding sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and myofibral hypertrophy. The old saying, strength training under 5 reps will build dense, higher myofibril muscle, and hypertrophy training 6+ reps will cause more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, doesn't really add up, as one can happen without the other. I won't. Should I read it all?
No. So I'm not aware of anything that has come out just lately. I just know, and shout out to my man, Lionel McDonald. I'm talking about it for the second time here today. Crazy. Did a check-in where someone was asking me about Lyle, and I was just reading him aloud some of the email headlines that we received at some point. And he has a fantastic article around sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, actually. So go check this one out if you haven't. And now I'm going to cough around. So
I have a better recommendation. I'm going to tell them to fuck Lyle, and Lyle's great. But go and check out the episode we did with Brandon Roberts, because I think that may still be the latest science that we have on sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, where I interviewed him and talked about it, where I mean, yeah, he goes into detail about it, and it's just cool that now it's kind of like what we thought wasn't taking place. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is probably taking place. So it's pretty cool, but I'm not sure the kind of the under 5 reps is the kind of building the hypertrophy like that. I think it potentially is higher repetition training is causing the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. That is kind of something we see with bodybuilders and powerlifters. But again, watch that episode because that goes into way more depth. And yeah, I haven't seen anything new come out. I'm sure it would have been in mass if it had come out recently. So yeah, I haven't seen anything new reviewed. I don't know if Andrew really asks anything else in there. I don't think so. So sorry, Andrew. I don't think so. But people that want to learn more about sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, check out the episode with Brandon, or go and check out Lyle's article. So Andrew White has asked, you've got an intermediate client in a hypertrophy vacuum and you have 365 days to get them as jacked as possible, or else the universe is going to explode and everyone dies. This client will do literally anything you say. The fate of the galaxy is in your hands. Design the perfect mass and following cut. They must be 10% when evaluated for maximum gains. Go. Speak as broadly or specifically as you want. Assume they are locally detrained and beginning of the experiment. Oh my God. I wish I didn't pick that question.
I think so much wouldn't change, actually. Like the way that I do things right now. It's just when they are in a vacuum, then I would also assume that their sleep, recovery time, so relaxation time, and food and all that kind of stuff is very much on point, because their only purpose is now to get as jacked and as lean as possible in 365 days. And if there's nothing else that they need to worry about, I think that someone can actually get very, very good at that. And then probably also twice daily training, 6 days out of the week. But yeah, in general, I don't think that very much would change, because the biggest hurdle for many people are just external factors.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
Maybe eat, sleep, train, repeat. It's like the hyperbolic time chamber in Dragon Ball Z where they can just be at it. But yeah, I mean, basically, like you said, they're going to have less external stress. They have no time limitations. So you just look to optimize everything. They can probably do more volume, which should allow them to get more jacked, and they can eat plenty. So yeah, I don't think there's anything, like, they already know the kind of the guidelines we would suggest generally. So yeah, let's go on to the next question, which is from Glenn how would I say this last name? Eridenkens, maybe. Eridenkens? There we go. What do you think is the difference in rate of gains between MEV training for a year or MAV training for a year, assuming you can constantly train at MAV, so just in theory, of course?
I think, so this is only my take, I think that the difference would be marginal at best. Of course, MEV to MAV is a spectrum, right? This is something that we have to acknowledge. For some people, MAV can be significantly higher than MEV, but let's just assume that it isn't. I think that the differences would be very, very little. And this is also something that we've talked about in the past, that if someone is always then training from MEV to MRV, and someone is only training, let's say, at MEV for the next 10 years, or no, for an indefinite amount of time, and then someone is stopping or so the guy training from MEV to MRV is stopping, maybe he will get to his genetic point, whatever this may be. And I think that this is a different story in and for itself, what genetic ceiling may look like. Let's just say he hits that. The other guy perhaps hits it a little bit later, but I don't think that the discrepancy would be significant. Perhaps it will be a couple of weeks, month, or maybe a year or so, but I think that the difference wouldn't be just like night and day over difference.
I really struggle with these sort of questions because I'm any question that ends in theory, and I'm always like, but this just has no practical application. I'm just I don't know.
The
so
thing
your
is,
answer is
I know how hard that is to answer, because it's just based on assumptions, right? But the thing is, if you try to wrap your head around, okay, let's just say someone who can't put as much work and dedication into a training protocol, he's limited on time, let's say, right? But he could actually train more from a recovery perspective. And then we have the same individual, let's say a twin or so, he is able to train always to MRV or so, right? What may the difference be in this scenario? And I don't think that the difference would be super significant, because we also know, like, let's take a look at the low volume crowd. Adding volume isn't like that you are adding rewards linearly. Like, adding a set doesn't give you like a linear return, right?
Diminishing returns, yeah.
Yeah, it is more like a bell-shaped curve. The more you add, the less and less you get in return, up to the point where it is then diminishing. And that's why I don't think that the difference between MEV to MAV is so significant, because I think that MEV will already cover, let's put an arbitrary number on it, 80% of your gains. And then the more you ramp things up to MRV, the less and less you add. So maybe the next step would be something like 5%. And then the next step would be something like 4%, then 3, then 2, then 1, then 0.5. And then you're getting all the way up to the top, where you are getting to your limit. And everything added after that doesn't really give you anything more other than accumulated fatigue.
Yeah, I imagine that is how, like you said, the bell-shaped curve. Cool. Roman Garm has asked, the common volume landmarks of about 10 to 20 set per muscle group are done with an 8 RPE, right? How would they change if every set was RPE of 9?
Do you want to answer that one first? Because otherwise I'm always answering first.
I don't know if I do, actually. So the volume landmarks, the 10 to 20 sets. Maybe, I think, yes, on average, it will be training with a RPE 8. So how would they change if it was an RPE 9? Possibly, I would say, a slight reduction, because you're getting a little bit more stimulus from training slightly closer to failure. So you might be able to get away with a little bit less, but your fatigue is also going to be higher, so you probably can't train quite as high. So I would say maybe like 8 to 18 or something like that, possibly. That's the way I interpret it anyway, I think.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Pascal?
Yeah, I mean, 10 to 20 sets is a wide range, right? So I think that the higher you go in relative intensity, or with the RPE, or vice versa, the lower you go in RER, the more unlikely it is that you can be up there in the 20 sets for a prolonged period of time. And that's just a fact. The harder you, let's just say, try to do 20 sets per week with RER of 0.
For more than 1 week.
Yeah, depending on the muscle group, it's getting very, very challenging. Something like a bicep, maybe, yeah, can get away with that. Something like the quads, ooh, that's going to be a tough one, right? To do it on a consistent basis. And that's why, does it really matter then? Like where the RPE falls in the 10 to 20 rep set range? Everything, so all of these things, they are just concepts that you have to then go out and apply for yourself and modify to your needs and what it is that you want also. And based on the modifications, then it will dictate how many sets it is that you need, sets that it is that you want to do, and where the relative intensity will fall into. And that's why every kind of the methodologies that are floating out there, they are still applying the same principles in it for itself, and that is progressive tension overload. And as long as this is in check, I think that there are many ways to actually set up a proper program. And we know that, we see that. Just because people are always then bringing up like AJ when they are bringing up Steve's progression. And both have actually grown significantly in the last off-season with quite of a different approach. And this is once again a very good example of that there are so many ways to go about it as long as some principles are respected.
Yeah, and I think that's very well said. And I think that's what I was thinking when people ask these sort of questions. I'm like, you need to, look at them as maybe a guideline, like a calorie calculator. You might look at it as a guideline, but then adjust for what you're seeing in real time. And I also think, I'll be interested to talk to Mike about this, but when they discuss the volume landmarks, they're generally in combination, just like assuming people are starting like at 3 to 4 RER and then ending at 0. It's kind of, they go almost hand in hand, because if you start your mesocycle, your MEV is going to be different if you go to failure in week 1, and your MRV will be then different. So it's kind of like when they're talking about those set ranges, generally it's talking about like starting at lower RPEs or higher RERs and then moving progressive overloading, and making things harder over time and getting progressively closer to failure. So yeah, I just thought I'd add that because I think some people get confused sometimes with that. So secondly, how long to wait before changing an exercise after they stagnate? Shall I answer that one first?
Yeah, because I have a hard time actually in answering that.
So yeah, I think it's a tricky one, partly because it's kind of like, what's the confirmed definition of stagnation necessarily?
This is exactly my thought and why I had such a hard time actually coming up with an answer.
Yeah, it's just really hard because it's like, is it stagnating, or are there other factors that are leading to performance maybe not improving like it used to? And I think when I'm thinking about stagnation, I would say generally, potentially it's not giving you as good a stimulus, like stimulus to fatigue ratio. That's kind of one thing I would look at. So if I'm getting not as good pumps from it, my mind-muscle connection's not as good, disruption's not feeling as good, maybe I'm just feeling more systemically fatigued from the movement, so the stimulus to fatigue ratio is just getting worse. I'm finding that I used to be able to add 2% every week and my RER would drop by 1. Now I'm only adding 1%, or like some weeks I'll repeat performance and like it's just, I can feel it slowing down. I probably would start thinking, this is an exercise I probably want to start rotating. And that tends to happen maybe after, for most exercises, 3 mesocycles, I would say. I certainly wouldn't like to rotate a big compound movement after just 1 mesocycle, unless you've tried it and you're just like, no, it's definitely dog shit for me. I just don't have the right leverages for this or whatever. I try and wait out a little bit more time. So yeah, I mean, once you feel like the stimulus to fatigue ratio is really starting to not work for you, I think in some instances you could be progressing a movement that the stimulus fatigue ratio could be getting worse, and you might even decide, actually, I'm just like beating myself into the ground to try and progress this. Let's start thinking about rotating it. So I wouldn't wait that long, but I certainly would give the exercise due diligence and really check, like, is it really stagnating, or am I just getting bored, or did I just have a poor night's sleep and I think it's stagnated now, or something along those lines, or cutting or something like that.
Yeah, I would probably repeat everything that you said, with maybe just like adding one or two things here, because the thing is, when it comes to stagnation, so I'm a big proponent of keeping things relatively the same for as long as you can. I know that there are pros and cons to both sides, right? So changing exercises, but also sometimes keeping them. So keeping them, of course, puts you through the same movement pattern over and over again, which then can have detrimental effects to your connective tissues. This is something that I'm very well aware of. Changing things, though, gives you sometimes a false perception. Yes, it's a novel stimulus, it's a novel exercise, but is it so different so that it's inducing a truly novel hypertrophic stimulus? Don't know, not that sure about that. And the thing is that you are not working to your full capacity or ability then, because it is novel from a neurological perspective. So it will probably take you a little bit of time to get used to that new movement pattern. And we are more so referring to a more complex movement pattern, a compound movement pattern instead of a single joint movement pattern. Because I think that when you're doing preacher curls on a machine, it isn't really that different to doing, I don't know, a different bicep variation or so, right? But if it's something like a leg press in comparison to something like free weight squats or so, of course, this can make a bigger difference in it for itself. But then you need to realize, like, neurological effect is taking place. So once you're starting that new exercise, you will probably work not at your full capacity. While in reality, the other exercise, you always work at your full capacity, and you are still inducing that hypertrophic stimulus. This is going back to the what is progressive overload thing that Brian Miner is always talking about. And we are also hitting home in regards to saying, okay, once you have done one thing, that doesn't become your new baseline, and you always have to push further and further to induce a new progressive overloading stimulus. No, you could actually repeat that same thing. And once you're getting to the point where your true capacity is actually hit, it will become harder to progress. But that doesn't mean that you are not progressing or you're not inducing a sufficient hypertrophic stimulus. While on paper, it may look as if you are stagnating. Maybe you are still inducing the highest amount of hypertrophic stimulus that you can in that given scenario. And that's why I would always look for other things, such as you rightly put out so yourself, if something feels just off, where the pumps aren't really there anymore, doesn't really feel natural, you don't really feel strong in that movement anymore, or psychologically you just need a change, then of course it may be a good idea. If not, and on paper, the only thing that is stagnating is the thing on paper, but everything else is still feeling good, and so I would still stick with it.
Yeah, I'd hate to see someone think that they finish a mesocycle doing, like, I don't know, 100 for 10, and then next mesocycle they try starting at 100 for 10, and they're like, man, I can't possibly increase this next week. It's like, well, once you're intermediate, you aren't increasing on a weekly basis. So yeah, that overload threshold for people is such a game changer, I think.
And I always bring up the example, and I don't know why, of John Meadows. Just imagine someone like who has trained since over 30 years. If someone like him would have always progressed on a weekly basis and either adding one repetition or some load to the bar, he would be the strongest motherfucker in every single gym, and would just like use the entire stack of the lat pull down, and maybe, I don't know, attach the entire leg press machine to the stack as well, because this is how much weight he now has to move in order to get a good hypertrophic stimulus. Well, in reality, they are still using an appropriate amount of load.
This is a really interesting point, because I don't know about you, Pascal, but I have squatted more than what I might squat now, but the hypertrophic stimulus now is far superior to before. Part of that's technique, but part of that's just driving internal stimulus versus just using everything I can to get the weight up. And sometimes I catch myself where I'm trying to push load too quickly because I'm like, oh, progressive overload, I need to go there. I'm like, yeah, but how much am I actually feeling this in my chest versus just trying to get it up because, it's a cool to make sure it's always going up. Because like you mentioned there, we want to be in this for years and years and years. If we're able to add, I don't know, a pound every week to a movement every single week we're training, you'd be the strongest person in the world. It's not going to happen. So yeah, there are multiple ways to progress. And one of them, I think, as you get more advanced, we've talked about it, but maybe not quite in this way. It's like just that mind-muscle connection, dedicating internal stimulus, and you get better at doing that. So like a 10 kilo dumbbell or lateral raise, you might be doing that for like 5 years, but now the stimulus you're getting to your actual side delt, the lateral delt, is way better than it used to be. So yeah, I think that's like John Meadows is a great example of that, because I think he'd attest to that big time.
And in addition to that, we also, so of course, I'm definitely not the best in talking about muscle physiology, but if we take a look at this from a physiological perspective, we know that the central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system is then recruiting the motor units and the muscle fibers. And it's a skill. It's a neurological skill that needs to be developed. That's why some people, I would assume, have an easier time actually having a good mind-muscle connection from the get-go, because they are able to recruit a lot of motor units from the get-go. And these are the ones, I would assume, that have an easier time growing in the first initial stages of their lifting career. Whereas other people who say, like, I can't really feel it in my back, for example, they take years of actually getting there, because the neurological pathways first need to actually be developed and connected. And once you're there, you're able to recruit more and more motor units, because the peripheral nervous system is actually then sending that signal of like, okay, we need more motor units in order to move or create the force in order to move the weight now from A to B. And these are skills that sometimes need to be developed, like neurological skills, such as every other skill that you're learning as well. It's a neurological skill that needs to be developed, right? Same as like when you're taking a look at kids, why can't they walk in the beginning? At first, it's due to, of course, also muscularity. They are not very much developed, but also from a neurological perspective, because the neurological pathways haven't yet connected in order to actually get that groove going of like, okay, what is walking actually? And the same applies to something like training as well. That's why I think that if you, Steve, same as you, I'm using on some of the lifts that I'm doing less load than in the past. But I have the feeling that I am so much more connected with my muscles than I ever was in the past. Because I think that over time, when you're repeating that over and over again, the neurological pathways are actually then being built and being developed, and you're able to recruit more muscle fibers on a per rep basis over the years then.
An easy one for people listening is like posing. When I first tried to do, I don't know if this is the same for you, Pascal, that front relaxed. So like trying to spread my lats.
Yeah.
Like, I can't fucking do this. Yeah. What is that?
Yeah.
Like I couldn't do it at all.
Absolutely.
But once you start doing it, it's like, that's easy. You get better and better at it. So that's a great example. And I think we're at time, aren't we? So we can hold the last question.
We are. Of course, this time we have not forgotten about it. As always, I will share my screen now with you guys.
Oh yeah, I had forgotten.
So wait a second, where do we have it? There it is. So let's bring it up. Share screen. Where's it here? Let's just use this one. I'll share my screen here. You can see it, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. It's the comment picker once again, going over to the improvement season 173, mini cut or normal cut. Going over here, and please don't pick the trolls. So plugging in the video URL, 20 comments. So start raffle and pick random winner. And this time it is one of the trolls, I think. Mel Toretto here. You two love to overthink everything. Yes, that is correct. Come to Toretto Academy and let's kill the myth. Tip, all you need is 0.35 grams of protein per pound of body weight spread out per day. Well, yeah, so congratulations on winning access to our member site.
Come join our member site.
Yeah, do we have some kind of protein courses there? I think
we do.
Yeah, I think that Brandon Roberts did one. if I'm not
think
mistaken.
Brandon did,
yeah,
yeah.
muscle
He
protein
did.
synthesis. So yeah, Mel, reach out to us, buddy. Welcome to the Revive Stronger Academy then. Do we have anything like a
I was
topic?
trying to think of a question for this time, and I literally nothing. I've got one thing's just sprung to my mind, but it's a terrible, and it's not related to anything we just talked about. But I can say it if you haven't got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's change it. Okay, so I'm going to go for people's favorite anime, or if you don't know an anime, cartoon. I was going to say their favorite Dragon Ball Z character.
Yeah.
You can say that as a bonus, but I expect maybe not everyone watches Dragon Ball Z, but probably everyone's watched a cartoon or anime.
Yeah, on that note, recently over on Instagram, I said like, yeah, I'm right now revisiting like older classic animes, which I'm always doing. There are just a couple of ones that I've watched 1,000 of times already because I know what I get and they are great. And then there was a time where I watched 7 Deadly Sins, Akame ga Kill, what else was there? JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and most of them I stopped after one season because they were just like, not the greatest, right? And then after that, I sometimes just need to have great animes once again. Then I said like, okay, or most favorite anime, which was poorly phrased from me because some people were then saying like Dragon Ball Z. Sorry to bring it to you guys. Dragon Ball Z is definitely not the best anime there is. I know it may be yours, but this is probably because you haven't really checked out what other animes there are out there.
That's me.
And this is purely your nostalgia speaking. And I can relate to that because I grew up with Dragon Ball Z each and every single day. What was it? 7:05 on the dot, RTL2 in Germany each and every single day, and going to watch this. But yeah, Dragon Ball Z is not the best anime that there is. Once again, it's nostalgia, and I know that your emotions are speaking now, but greatest anime? Like,
what's the difference between anime and a cartoon?
A cartoon. A cartoon is a completely different genre. So an anime is an animation of a manga, and the manga is basically the cartoon, if you want to call it that. Right? So the manga is basically the comic, and the anime is the animated version of the manga.
So would like a Spider-Man wouldn't be anime because it comes from a cartoon?
Kind of, but I don't even know whether
magazine.
you can call a comic adaptation an anime. It's definitely an animated comic, but I don't know if it's. I have no idea. Like honestly, I just know that it's the animated version of a manga is an anime.
Okay. I'm clueless. I think I've only watched. I think Dragon Ball Z may be the only anime I've ever watched.
See,
unless Pokemon is one.
It is.
I don't know if that is. So
I would
maybe
assume.
Pokemon
I
as
don't
well.
know if they had a manga before. Could be that it was just like a show. Don't know. Anyway, yeah, it was a good one. And sorry if I now destroyed your childhood dreams. And yeah, but Dragon Ball Z is not the best anime there is. Fight me.
Wait, now we need to know what is.
I have like different genres because, of course, there are different genres in anime. But for example, I can name 3 immediately, and that is like Death Note. Death Note is freaking great. Then a Cowboy Bebop. It's iconic in it for itself. Everything about it is next to be perfect. Like honestly, in my opinion at least. When it comes to shonen, just Naruto.
Katie's favorite was the second one, right?
Yeah. And she's really not into anime at all.
I've never heard of any of those, I don't think. Apart from, I think I heard the second one on your story.
Yeah, no, she's very much into Death Note. So I watched Death Note with her once, and she was very impressed by it. And really, she's one who doesn't really like anime just because it's anime. Right? And she was impressed by Death Note. But I tried Cowboy Bebop on her, and that wasn't for her, for example.
Okay, we just had an education in anime. Hope
Sorry for that, guys.
Oh, I did.
Cool. Guess I'll speak
Catch
to you
you
guys
next
soon.
time.
Cheers.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge, and I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.